that what's happening here is people are being judged based on the color of their skin, not the content of their character.
You mentioned that statement from Martin Luther King that we should be judged on content like the color of our skin played a role in our constitutional policy. Do you think this is reflected in the founding sections of the Constitution which state that South African nation is founded on the basis of race?
Yes, it says that South Africa is founded on the notion of I mean, we know the preamble to the Constitution, Section 1, happening in South Africa. It is as if there's this growing gap between what the Constitution promises and what's happening on ground level in South Africa in terms of stereotyping and minorities feeling like they are treated like second class citizens and so forth.
I'd like to refer you to one example in the book at the bottom of page 158, 158. You refer to an incident at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in 2010. Could you tell us about that incident?
Yes, so that was posters that were put up. I remember that. It was 2010, I think, 2010. I was at that time still involved with Afriforum Youth. So especially the focus was, universities and student affairs was part of my focus. And these posters were put up, and the text of the poster is here. It's on page 158 to 159. This was still the time of SASCO and ANC Youth League when Julius Malema, Mr. Malema was the president of the Youth League. And the poster said, it was during the SRC election, as far as I recall, the student council election, and the poster said, a vote for SASCO is a vote for ANC, and a vote for ANC is a vote for Julius Malema. One boer, one bullet. Viva Julius Malema, viva. Students, please vote for SASCO, 100% blacks only organization, strictly South Africans. Amanda.
There's something striking about the poster, 2 regards, 3 regards. Could you elaborate on how you first take the term one world, one bullet?
Can you just repeat that first part? Is it something striking about the poster?
Yes, I think I'll try and deal with them as 3 separate questions.
Okay.
Could you comment on that slogan, one boer, one bullet?
Yes, well, it's quite evident. It says one boer, one bullet, and we know there's a discussion in the book also about the word boer, which is, in Afrikaans, the word boer has 2 meanings. It refers to the occupation of being a farmer. It's the Afrikaans word for farmer, but it's also a word referring to a particular ethnic group. It's a synonym for the word Afrikaner. We could say, we could describe it as such. And that's why sometimes people talk about, are you talking about boer with a capital B, or in Afrikaans, boer with a hoofletter B or a klein letter B. So if you say boer with a capital B, it's referring to an ethnic community. While the word boer in English usually refers to the ethnic community or cultural community. In Afrikaans, it has a double meaning. But there is this context, the word boer has this link to being a farmer. There's a link in terms of the etymology of the word. And it says here, one boer, one bullet. And I think it's quite evident what that means. We can have a debate or discussion about what that could potentially mean. But just reading the words, it's quite clear. And it doesn't mean, the context is quite clear also. It doesn't mean that we have to give a bullet to a boer, hand the bullet over. It means shooting words. That's what this means. And it's usually used within the context of shoot to kill and so forth. And the fact that this is linked so obviously, so blatantly to Julius Malema, and the fact that it's linked so blatantly to an organization that is aligned with Julius Malema is very alarming.
The second part of the poster that I'd like you to comment on is it says SASCO is a 100% blacks only organization. Comment on that.
Yes, it's. I think this was within the context of. Let me answer it like this. It's again, I don't know how we can have a discussion about what that could potentially mean, or philosophically what could that mean. But just reading the text, it's quite clear. It's blacks only organization. It means there's an underlying racist motive. Now we can also ask if SASCO is really a 100% blacks only organization. I don't know. I don't think so. But the fact that they are prepared to put this on it, someone from SASCO apparently is prepared to put this on a marketing poster.
And the reference to strictly South Africans?
I think, well, this to me appears to me that this is within the context of xenophobic violence, the concern about foreign nationals coming in. That would be my speculation. They said strictly for South Africans. It's a way of taking a stance against other communities. But I think what's interesting here is it says strictly South Africans, but it also says blacks only. So it's as if the message is conveying that you're not really a South African if you're not black. And I think this should be seen within the context of the one Boer, one bullet as well. So we are the strictly South Africans, but one Boer, one bullet, and blacks only. So it is quite a lot.
There's the implication as well that if you are black and not South African, you are not welcome in the organization.
Yes. So to me is clearly the implication that if you are black, if you are not black or not South African, you are not welcome.
Do you have a sense what Mr. Malema or the EFF's current view of non-South Africans who are black?
I do have a sense, although I'm hesitant because I haven't written about this in detail, but I do have a sense that still there's an underlying anger about, directed also towards, I just want to make sure I ask you about not South Africans or not black?
Who are black and not South African?
Oh, yes, okay. No, so the sense that I get is that there still is this anger directed at people who are not South Africans. Also, it appears to me from what I read in the media to be conflicted. Because sometimes you get the impression that this is a South Africans only type thing. Then sometimes you get Julius Malema talking about uniting Africa. He talks about the United States of Africa. So it seems to me as if, just as someone reading the news about what he says, it appears to me as if he's contradicting himself in that sense.
In terms of, you refer a bit later to some of the climate and some of the climate online. On page 160, you refer to Lindsay Marshall from Black First Land Person, you refer to some of his tweets. Could you give us an indication of those?
Yes, well, perhaps it's worth mentioning that the organization Black First Land First was founded, as far as my understanding goes, after some form of a public disagreement between its leader, Andile Ngitama, and Julius Malema, and that Ngitama used to be a member of parliament for the EFF, after which there was some internal issue and he was accused of having been disciplined and so forth. Interestingly, I haven't heard the comment made that Ngitama's problem within the EFF was that they disagreed ideologically, but that there were other issues. He was indisciplined and so forth. So eventually he was, I don't know if he left or if he was kicked out, but then he founded this new organization called Black First Land First, and its spokesperson is a man named Lindsay Marshall, who has made some really, really atrocious comments. And there's a list of things Marshall has said. I believe all of them were from not all of them are from Twitter. If you want, I can read them. There are 6 bullets. Would you like me to read through them?
Yes.
So, on 29 February 2016, he tweeted, him being Marshall, "We must turn our anger towards the enemy. A few of us will have to act and turn majority to see Ngitama, #BLF, #Africans Speak." On 7 March 2016, he tweeted, "Let's not be lazy with #Feet Must Fall, #End Outsourcing. Decolonization is no process, it's a violent revolution, a taking back of the land." On 23 February 2016, he tweeted, "Fuck white people," in capital letters with exclamation point. On 11 February 2016, he tweeted, "Let's unite principled black forces of occupied Azania. We must remove the non-whites, go on and destroy white power. Hashtag shutdown Soma." On 23 March 2016, he posted a link to a News 24 article titled, "Resign for the Kids, 200 urges Zuma," on his Facebook profile, accompanied by the following comment: "We need to do it for our children. No flight and no ship. 3 feet under, a shallow grave!" Exclamation mark. "This arrogant white fool has reaped from the blood and sweat of black lives. We must deal with him decisively." 3 January 2017, when the Cape Town area was scorched by veld fires, he posted on his Facebook page, "Black God needs servants in Cape Town." CT, meaning Cape Town, obviously. Colon. "Wind plus matches plus white-owned farms."
You then, under that reference that you gave to carte blanche, tell us what you said.
Yes, I remember the story. It was a section, a segment of the well-known current affairs program Carte Blanche, which airs on Sunday evenings, one of the most popular TV shows in South Africa. And it was about farm murders, and they asked him about some of these comments. And he said, and it's quoted on page 161, "Black people are upset and angry, and rightfully so, because land has been stolen historically and it needs to be returned. And so if black people are responding to that violence with violence, then they are well in their right to take back the land by any means necessary."
What is your response to a statement of that nature?
Well, what was particularly alarming about this is he was questioned about the above comments that I just quoted. The journalist said, "Well, it seems to us like you're encouraging murder and violence towards a minority community." And then he said, "Well, we have to take back the land by any means necessary." So he's not saying, no, I'm quoted out of context, so that's not really what you mean. He says, well, yes, we need to take the land by any means necessary. So he's justifying his comments about burning down farms and murdering people and dealing with it decisively and so forth by saying any means necessary. It is particularly alarming. And he knows it's being filmed, and he knows it's going to be aired on a show like Carte Blanche.
At the, you make reference to a discussion in the National Assembly in March 2017. Could you state what you did there?
Yes, this was a discussion about farmers. So in 2017, there was a discussion in the National Assembly about what's happening on South Africa's farms. And there, certain comments were screened from lectures in Parliament. And in this particular case, the one I'm quoting here is an ANC MP, Zile Promise Manana, who shouted, buried him alive during a speech that was made by Dr. Peter Groenewald from Freedom Front Plus, in which he pleaded for farm murders to be prioritized.
Is there a concern that political parties don't take farm murders seriously?
It's a very serious concern. There are some parties, some of the smaller parties, who are very alarmed about this, want this to be prioritized, and have spoken out about this. But I would say the main concern here is both the ruling party and the economic freedom fighters. When they talk about this, they usually just ignore the existence of the problem. But if they are somehow forced to talk about this, they either encourage it or they justify it by saying, well, these farmers get what's coming to them, or they deserve it. They encourage it by saying we need to take back the land by any means necessary. Or they make a mockery of it by making comments like what I mentioned yesterday, Julius Malema's saying, when someone said to him, people are saying you are behind farm murder, and he said, well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. So yes, there is this concern that political parties number.
Thanks. Page 162 of your book, you have a section there on police assignment. Can you describe that?
Yes, so this, what I'm referring to here is incidents of police officers who have made comments about farm owners, very alarming comments. So there are a few here. The one is, it's on page 162 of the book, as you said. The one here is Lelele Molwane Wabeni, who's a police officer from the Eastern Cape, who said on Facebook, and he made a post on Facebook, and he said, "We must continue to kill more of their farmers, at least to make up for what they did to us." Then Chris Kumotsu from the Gauteng Youth Crime Prevention Desk of the South African Police Service said that all white man deserves to die. In future, fuck you, Mr. White Man. And then he also posted pictures of firearms and ammunition lying on a desk in a police station. And then he added, he said, "I predict civil war in the 90s by 2019. Take out your guns, fighters, because actually we won't turn back." If I can continue, there's another case that I mentioned, Constable Elvis Tagiso Sitoli. He was charged for posting the following message on Facebook: "I normally suffocate a bit with a refuse bag, this kind of racist, before putting them in the holding cells, because it doesn't leave any marks. They just become red, and after doing the paperwork, I lock them up and take the docket home so that no one can release them until we meet with the Honourable Magistrate in the court, the next court date." He was then told, I think in the comment section, someone said to him that they're going to report him to the station tomorrow. And he said, "Great news indeed." Complaint was filed to the Human Rights Commission, but the complaint did not really lead to anything.
You said yesterday that part of the vilification process is to target your heritage.
Yes, so they started in a sense with the Rhodes Must Fall campaign. So Cecil John Rhodes can hardly be described, or the statue of Cecil John Rhodes can hardly be described as Boer heritage. But I mentioned that there's this anti-Western sentiment. Now, if you know the history of the Afrikaners and the British, you would know that the Afrikaners also regard someone like Cecil John Rhodes as someone who did very atrocious things to the Afrikaners and so forth. He was organizing the Jameson raid and so forth. But we've seen different. It started there, but then it spread out to various issues. And one strange example was that I mentioned here. Well, there are quite a few. President C.R. Swart, his statue in Bloemfontein was completely destroyed. Even the horse memorial statue in Port Elizabeth, which is just a statue of a horse commemorating the role that horses have played in history, was broken down, particularly by the EFF. The EFF claimed that the statue was, and I quote, "a symbol of an economic system that has been imposed on black people by foreign settlers." There are other examples. I mentioned the one Willow sector comment associated with the Rhodes Must Fall movement. Tedu Amini, former president of the SRC, represented Trump at the University of Witwatersrand, said on Facebook that he loved Adolf Hitler, and members of the movement were also seen on campus wearing T-shirts with words "Kill the Whites." Afriforum has been involved with this, stakeholder meetings and conferences about heritage, how do we protect heritage. What's particularly, I remember a colleague of mine was at this meeting when a representative of the Department of Arts and Culture asked everyone who was present at one of these meetings to stand up and applaud the leaders of the Rhodes Must Fall movement and praise them as national heroes. So this is the same movement that is associated with T-shirts that says "Kill the Whites."
next section that you have is titled Murdering Farmers. And you made mention of one of those instances yesterday of knowledge voice and if you could talk about that and also about
Yeah, well, this is a very important section. Maybe if you want, I can read that page 164 and 165. If you want, then, continue with the discussion on the next page. I think it's necessary. There have also been many cases where white farmers in particular were murdered, and where the attackers openly acknowledged that they had committed murder because that had been their intention. Other than that, many cases of farm attacks during which the attackers chanted political slogans or made racist or political statements towards their victims have also been reported. In April 2010, Leon Kookamoo, who was 39 years old, was attacked on his farm near Cullinan in Gauteng. The attackers screamed the words, "Die white man, viva Malema," as they were attacking Kookamoo. In June 2014, Knowledge Paulus Mandazi, who was 28 years old, admitted to murdering 5 white farmers in 3 months between March and June 2014. "My hate for white people made me do it," he said. He described his conduct as barely going to work, and he boasted in the courtroom about the fact that he now had 6 murders under his belt. They also had money which he wanted, the judge said. Once again proving that a murderer can have a racist motive as well as a simultaneous motive to commit robbery, disproving the notion that a farm attacker can only have a single motivation, as was assumed by the given trial in the farm attack in 2003. This will be discussed yesterday. On 10 May 2017, a person who goes by the name of Hindu Bantu Benzonda Zeleni posted the following message on Twitter. He said, "Me and my homies are planning to attack these farmers around the south coast of KZN. They are shooting everything down. We are going to shoot back since the police are friends with these farmers." That evening, KwaZulu-Natal farm owner Michael Sterling, 64 years old, was attacked by unknown suspects while he was alone. He was stabbed and his body was set alight. The house was ransacked. The police stated that they could not determine the motive for the attack and that it was not clear if anything had been taken from the house. When Mike Bonnet, 70 years old, was attacked and tortured on his Gauteng farm in April 2018, his attackers referred to him as a white shit and accused him of having stolen the land. In 2017, maybe I can continue. This is also an important section. In 2017, a copy of a conversation between a National Intelligence Agency agent, that's the NIA, and a so-called general of the notorious prison gang, the 28s, was broadcast on Carte Blanche. The gang leader spent more than 20 years in prison for farm murders and was released in December. On the audio clip, he makes the following statement. "They also told me that I was on the inside." Let me start again. "They also told me while I was on the inside that when I get out, I have to contact Julius Malema, the guy from Limpopo, from the EFF, because he was also here now in September. Julius Malema was in Pretoria, in New Lock. When he got there at New Lock, he said, when you gangs want a golden team, when you want a team, come and see me in Limpopo, and I can give you a team. What I will give you is a balaclava, a gun, and cash." He says straight that he is against the farmers, Julius Malema. He says you only have to murder farmers on farms. And then below that, Malema was invited to respond by carte blanche. His spokesperson, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, only responded that he was unable to respond to these allegations due to a busy schedule. The story soon faded away and there was no outcry in the media about this.
Are you aware of anyone else who made similar accusations?
Yes, I've been informed that personally as well. I was contacted, and I believe it's on the following page I discussed this, but I can tell you the story. I was once contacted by a man who called me from a prison, and he asked me to come and see him. He said to me over the phone, this was while I was writing the book, before the book was published, but I was obviously very vocal about this in the media and in charge of our campaign. He called me and he said to me over the phone that he had murdered a farmer, and he has been convicted and he is in prison, and he wants me to come and see him. He wants to talk to me. So I went there and I took a colleague of mine along, and we had a conversation with him, a very strange conversation. And we asked him, why did he do it? And he said to us that it was political. He gave me the name of the farmer. I looked up the story. He told me how he murdered this farmer, and I looked it up, and it was reported in the media and so forth. It was a farmer in the Free State. And his version, it sounds too strange to be true, but this is what he told us. He said to us that he was a member of Mkonto Sizwe. He said to us that he was given instruction to kill this farmer by people within the ruling party. And the reason why he's telling us this story was, he actually said he was given the instructions in Lethule House. That's what he said to us, in the ANC's headquarters. And then when this murder was committed, he was caught, he was arrested, and he was then abandoned by his party, who was not prepared to defend him. And so he said to us that he's a disillusioned member of this party, and he's angry at his party for having encouraged him to do this, and now once he's in trouble, they pretend like they don't know him and so forth. So that was the conversation we had. We had a second conversation with him, and I believe he is now out of prison. I believe he's not in prison anymore, because he said to me at the time that he is soon going to be released, but I haven't spoken with him since.
Okay, then turn to chapter 12 of your book, page 169, entitled The Scourge of Racism. Could you give us an overview of that chapter?
So I figured that you can't write a book about, a current affairs book about farm murders if we don't deal with racism in South Africa as well. And the extent of racism in South Africa. So a large part of the book is about comments made about the extent of racism in South Africa, high-profile incidents of racism, of which probably the most famous one is Penny Sparrow, and there are some others, people who've lost their jobs and so forth as a result of racism. I then discuss what I call a double standard in terms of how racism is responded to. And then I also deal with the data on racism, statistics, research that has been published by various research institutions, largely based on polls conducted within the community, asking people how do they feel, have they experienced racism, how big of a problem do they think racism is, and so forth. So I try to, it's a broader discussion about racism, but I approached it in as far as it is relevant to the issue of farm murders.
At page 171 of your book, you have a quote from Beryl Haffajee, who at the time was the editor-at-large for the Huffington Post in Africa. Could you read out that quote for us?
Is that the quote towards the end of the page, the second last paragraph? So this is in quotes. She says, "Everywhere I turn, a generation born free
is talking as if it is at once obsessed by let me just read the quote again. Everywhere I turn, a generation born free is talking as if it is at once obsessed by and imprisoned by whiteness and white supremacy. She then continues, she says, the black obsession with whiteness and white privilege is all, it seems, we ever talk about in sustained ways in our national conversations. To my ear, it sounds as if whites are spoken of as if they are a majority in power rather than a small group of varied political sentiments.
You then refer to, on that page, a quote by France Grenier, the then Chief Operating Officer of the Institute for Race Relations. Is that what his comment was?
That's the following paragraph. Am I correct? So he says, it is truly frightening to read some of the things that are written, not by drunken louts, but by educated people, in what one might have thought were respectable publications, says Grenier. He continues, lectures are held at universities, the transcripts of which read like a throwback to Germany in November of 1938. When a university building is burned to the ground, media commentators write reams about the emotional pain that must have driven the students to embark upon such an act of vandalism. This is nonsense. Arrest the vandals and tell the rest to grow up. Shall I continue? There's a following.
Yes.
He says, where will it end if feeling unhappy is sufficient justification for arson? The entire country will be burnt to the ground.
You stated that there's a double standard. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, there are many ways of pointing to the double standard. There's one particular case. I wonder if it's written in this section. I don't see it here. It's somewhere in the book, but there are. You can compare the public reaction to certain individuals. And what we have found in South Africa, at Afriforum in our studies, we've appointed a researcher to build a database. Some of it is discussed in this book in chapter 16, but there's also other research, further research, just about incidents of racism and how it is responded to. And firstly, there's a problem in South Africa where if there's an incident, especially some form of an incident of violence, two people, there's an incident, someone inflicted violence on someone else. If these two individuals are from different racial groups, it is almost always immediately accepted that this was an act of racism. So whenever two people are involved in a scuffle or something, and you know, it's accepted this is racism, even if there's no evidence that racism played any role. And what we have found is that the most important, and I quote this in chapter 16 of the book as well, the most significant determining factor, well, let me explain it this way, we chopped it up in a bunch of different variables, such as, you know, where did it happen, who was the victim, who was the perpetrator, and you know, different variables. And we determined the single most significant variable that determines how the public responds to an incident, and I could add the media in particular, responds to an incident of violence, especially in this context on farms, is not the race of the victim, it's the race of the perpetrator. So if, for example, there's an incident of black on black violence, to use those terms, it's usually not given a lot of attention in the media, and you won't hear the EFF making speeches about a black man who murdered another black man. So it's not about the race of the victim. If it's white on white violence, you tend to read about it much more frequently in our analysis. If it's black on white violence, it gets an amount of attention. But if it's white on black violence, there's a national outcry. Not even just violence. If it's racist words if a white person makes a video and posts it on social media where he uses the K word, which of course is a very atrocious and a disgusting word, it goes viral and you read about it in the newspapers, and you would read about it on the front page of the newspapers. If it's the other way around, if someone makes even if it's a completely unknown person, if it's the other way around, if it's a completely unknown black person who says, let's kill all the whites, it's usually not reported. It's not regarded as newsworthy. And that is something that we are concerned about. And obviously there are such examples. There are many such examples. So there's a double standard, particularly when it comes to the race of the perpetrator. And this goes back to the brutal farmer stereotype. So if the perpetrator is white, it sort of strengthens this brutal farmer stereotype. If the perpetrator is black, it doesn't strengthen the stereotype, so we don't hear about it. Or we hear significantly less about it.
What is the underlying reason why you're concerned about this double standard?
Well, the underlying reason goes back to the point I've been making about stereotyping and marginalization. Atrocious deeds need to be condemned. It needs to be pointed out, and there need to be an outcry. We need to be disgusted and alarmed when people make racist comments on social media, and we all need to play our role to combat that, to prevent that from happening. But what is alarming is if it's only racist comments in a particular direction, or perhaps not only, if it's largely or mostly racist comments in a particular direction that results in a public outcry. But when it's in the other direction, we don't see that. And there are many examples. One example I mentioned in the book is I can't remember if it was on the same day, I think it might have been on the same week. In Pretoria there were two incidents. One was I'm sure many people will remember that, a girl in high school in Pretoria was told that she is not allowed to have an afro at school. She has to cut her hair. And she regarded that as racist because she was not allowed to express her culture. And there was it was a big story in the news. It was in the news for months about, this racist white, supremacy being entrenched in schools, and this girl has a different culture and she's not allowed to express herself in her culture. And there was a big outcry. But that was a school across the street from the University of Pretoria, and I believe it was in the same week. I can get you the exact dates if you want. Across the street at the University of Pretoria, a student leader, a well-known student leader, in fact he was a member of the student council, made a post on Facebook, and he said that he wants to murder white people, and white people should be killed with a bazooka. But there was not a national outcry about this. I remember there was a story about that in Beeld, the Afrikaans newspaper. I don't remember it being reported in any of the English news outlets, and I don't remember an outcry by the EFF or the ANC or public commentators. Now you can say, I don't know if it's necessary to weigh them up and say which is worse, saying that one person saying that I want to murder people with a different skin color than I have with a bazooka, or as opposed to someone being told that she's not allowed to have an afro at school. Both of them you could say is wrong, but in the one case there was a massive outcry and in the other case there wasn't. Another example is, there are many examples, but another example is the well-known case of Penny Sparrow, the estate agent who made some atrocious comments online, which was obviously racist, and compared black people to monkeys and so forth. And then in response to that, a government official who works for one of the Gauteng Department of Sport, I think, went on Facebook and he said that we need to do to white people what Hitler did to the Jews. Now again, you can say which is worse. I think in our zeitgeist, to go back to that word, in zeitgeist in South Africa at the moment, being white and insulting black people is regarded as much worse than being black and encouraging the murder of white people.
As you're approaching the tea break, maybe an appropriate time to take